Srinivas Rao is the host and founder of the Unmistakable Creative Podcast, where he has had conversations with over 500 insanely interesting people. Guests on the show have included ex-cons, graffiti artists, psychologists, entrepreneurs, and many others. He's also the author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Art of Being Unmistakable. Okay. Hi, Prana Boosters. Welcome to this episode of Prana Boost Radio. My guest, Prana Booster, today is the unmistakably creative Srini Rao. Hi.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Nice to have you. I'm really excited to connect with you and share space with you and introduce you to our audience and just get to know you a little better. So thank you for being with us today. It's amazing to learn all that you're doing to what I call Prana Boost the world, sort of raise the vibration of the world and, focus your energy on creativity and living outside of the box. So as the founder and CEO of the Unmistakable Creative brand and the Unmistakable Creative Podcast, I just want to thank you for having these conversations because I'm a mom of 2 little girls, and I'm really grateful to know that they're growing up in a world where people are coming out of their shells, so to speak, and being vulnerable and truthful and authentic. And I'm happy that this type of content is going to be, is already, but they're 8 and 10. Mm-hmm. But I'm saying it's going to be around when they start, asking questions and discussing feelings and their own heart's desire. They're going to be able to, for sure, listen to the amazing amount of information that you have and all the content that you've created, all the people that you have, spoken to and brought a light to through this platform, just so many different diverse backgrounds.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I can't. It's one of my friends who did listen for a while. He jokingly said it's like you've got an MFA in everything. Right.
It's true. Yeah, it's amazing. And I'm just wondering if you can share with us how, because obviously I have started this podcast and I kind of decided who I choose, like how it inspires me, or it just sort of happens that way.
Sure.
So obviously you had to decide what your show would be about. I mean, how did you even decide that these were the people you wanted to focus on interviewing?
I'm kind of the weird sort of organic story of somebody who found themselves on this path without planning to be. I started out with a blog, amazingly enough, and this is kind of I'll give you the short version of the story since I've told it so many times. One of the things I did as a byproduct of that blog was start a weekly series called Interviews with Up and Coming Bloggers. This was in 2009 when everybody was saying podcasting was dead. I didn't start with plans for a podcast or any of that, but one of the guys I interviewed said that I was a much more skilled interviewer than I am a writer, and that to this day still holds true. I think I've definitely I know that I can confidently say I'm incredibly skilled at it. I wouldn't say the same thing about myself as a writer. Like, writing takes me a lot more effort. It doesn't come as naturally to me. In terms of the people, that has evolved over time. I mean, like I said, it started out bloggers, but more and more it just started to move towards people who I thought had fascinating stories. If something about them made me curious, I wanted to know. And so that's led to conversations with, former drug dealers, bank robbers, graffiti artists, performance psychologists, visual artists, entrepreneurs. And really, I guess, all of them, I guess the common thread is there's something insanely interesting about them, but maybe the more common thread is something about them made me curious. Fortunately, my audience happens to agree with my taste most of the time. Sometimes they're wondering what the hell I was thinking. But I think it's in a willingness to take those risks that you really start to find some of the most amazing insights.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really cool. Yeah, and I think it's very subjective because we all have different, ideas of who interests us or touches us or whose story we would like to hear deeper. And I think it provides a wonderful medium to kind of get to ask those questions of those people on their journey, to be a witness to it. When I reached out to you, the show that I was listening to was the Danny Shapiro episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think I had already shared with you that I loved the part where she said we're all jealous of our own avatar and our online personas.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think, it made me think of where you say in your book that we often buy into a myth from what we assume we see, that someone has it all figured out. And online, it just looks like so many people have it all figured out. And then we compare ourselves to that. But when you get to hear their story, you realize, well, maybe they don't have, maybe they figured this out, but they didn't figure everything out. And maybe like there's something I can learn from them, but it kind of gets to the bottom of that myth.
Yeah, no doubt. Can you hold on just a second? My iPad is making a noise. I think it's connected to a charger, and for some reason the battery is draining. I just want to unplug it because it's really distracting.
Yeah.
All right, sorry about that.
That's okay.
No
problem.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I don't think anybody has it all figured out, and I don't know that we ever do. I mean, what the hell would be the point of living life if you woke up one day and you'd figured out everything? There'd be nothing left to figure out or nothing left to discover, and that wouldn't be very much fun.
But maybe some days.
Yeah.
Maybe like one day a week or something like that.
Exactly.
Take a break from figuring everything out.
Precisely.
And that's probably what you do when you're surfing, right? You just take a break.
Yeah, I mean, surfing is a disconnect for me. I mean, from everything and anything. It's a way of getting back in touch with, the purest sort of parts of who I am, where it's just about the joy of doing it. Like, there's no,
it's an inner connect instead of an outer connect.
Without a doubt. I mean, I can't imagine my life without it. It's such a deep and fundamental part of who I am. And, like I wonder at times, I'm like, wow, who was I and what did I do with my life before surfing? It takes up so much of my time.
I think I've said that to myself about parenting, actually. But I think my kids want to learn how to surf, but that freaks me out too, so we'll have to talk about that another time. But I really enjoyed your book. I read every word of it. And I loved the here where you talk about living life from a compass instead of a map, because I had never heard anybody say that before. And in your book, it takes a lot of courage, to go through life with a compass instead of a map. But I think by far it's definitely more fulfilling, but I think it's also much scarier. And I think that we have always lived like that, and so it feels like I really resonated with that. Here you say in your book, by following that map that someone else gave you, at best, I will become a pale imitation of the person who drew that map.
Yeah.
For us as parents, we've been essentially guiding them to tap into their own intuition, their own guidance system. And it does not go over very well in public or with, extended family, or because they don't think that they can actually do that.
Sure.
But, typically in parenting, you focus on, child's performance and society's expectations, and we often hear of it, life in the real world. Like, you gotta prepare them for the real world. Mm-hmm. And, so I thought that was really interesting. I just wanted to know if you would expand on that a little bit. I think we're just all come with these set of rules, and...
Well, so I can't speak to parenting specifically because I'm still like a 37-year-old kid.
Oh, no, but you growing up, you were a kid.
Yeah.
So you know how it comes upon you in school and by family and by...
I think that, absolutely. I mean, parents place all these expectations on their kids. They pile all these layers of self-doubt and fear and all these things, and then they give them maps and scripts and say, okay, follow the map, follow the script, everything will go according to plan. I'm basically the poster child for the fact that it doesn't work out. So, the way I think about this is... I think it's unusual to find kids who haven't grown up with this. It just is. I mean, it's a reality. I mean, that's why adults go to therapy. That's why adults, basically spend thousands of dollars in self-improvement. I mean, it's effectively a lot of cleaning up baggage that we have to get rid of. And the way I think of it is that you may have read this when I wrote it a while back. It's a snippet from something I have coming out, but I said, the spiritual journey of adulthood is like peeling off layer after layer until we get to back to that place of, wild-eyed wonder that we possessed in our childhood. And that to me is really what starting to trust your inner compass feels like.
Yeah. I love it. I really, really resonated with it. Here in your book, you also say so I think you are really skilled at writing. You're just maybe a little new at it. So you're saying that, but to become truly unmistakable, I have to be willing to ditch the map, travel without a guidebook, and see where it leads me. And it's funny because I played this song for my kids all the time that I really loved. It's by a singer called Natasha Bedingfield, and the song is called Unwritten.
Yeah, I know the singer. I don't know the song.
Okay, and it's basically about it's lyrics about writing your own journey. Like, you know, you're writing your own path and you're writing your own journey, and exactly what you're saying. You're following a compass so you're going in a direction, but you don't actually have any idea of the details of it. You know, which is really everything that I sort of teach and experience is the same thing would be called intuition. You know, and tapping into like your own divine guidance and trying to hear your inner voice instead of everybody else's voice in your head and what you should be doing. So I'm going to ask you about something, but since you said you don't have, you know, you are not a parent yet or anything, but I want to bring up this movie that might be considered like a kid's movie.
Sure.
But it totally relates to everything that you are, you know, teaching and sharing with everybody about, you know, living the compass and everything. It's called The Book of Life. So I don't know if it's... You would love it, though. It's really, really, really cool. It's really deep. There's a lot of lessons in it. But anyway, it's one of those 3D animated movies, and I don't think it got as much attention as it could have. But it was... So it's about a young man who's torn between fulfilling the expectations of his family and following his heart. So, I mean, it's the same thing that we're all talking about. It's the same exact thing. So, and in the movie, they say, you are not living the life that was written for you. Your book is blank, and you're writing your own story. And the whole, like, purpose of the story is that this character is afraid to be his authentic self. That's his greatest fear, is being himself. So it's pretty deep, actually. It's I don't know if the kids actually get it, you know, but if you watch it...
That is deep for a kid to get. But, I mean, if you could learn that lesson that early in life, it would be pretty useful.
Right. Absolutely. So, let me see. What else did I want to ask you? So, how did you make it through? Because you say from experience that you've had, you know, those challenges with maybe not meeting family expectations or society's expectations, you know, besides surfing, which I learned about you. What other types of methods do you think you have for coping with those challenges?
Alcohol? No, I'm kidding. You know,
ones that you can say.
You know, that's actually an interesting question. One, I've really thought about this a lot, right? I'm wondering why I would have stuck with it when most people would have quit. So there's a couple of things. For a while, I used to think that maybe, like, I thought, you know, I thought maybe there isn't anything internally built into me that allows me to do it, but I'm beginning to maybe think possibly there is. The other part of it is I couldn't see any other path. Like, no other path made any sense to me. No other path showed me potential for a future. Whereas this, I was just like, I know that if I am willing to trust what I'm feeling here, it will lead to amazing places. It already has, and it will continue to do so, even if it puts a few valleys in the way. And so I've never lost sight of that. And of course, you know, now I'm getting opportunities that I hadn't, you know, thought, like the kinds of opportunities that I had only read about, and the kinds of, you know, opportunities that I had interviewed people about are starting to show up in my life. So as far as coping mechanisms, that's a tough one. I think some people are built a certain way. I think some people are built with grit, the kind of grit that will cause them to basically keep going so far past when the average person would quit. I mean, you've read The Compass, like the latest writing project we're working on, and I think about what Angela Duckworth says about grit, which is, you know, an unswerving dedication and commitment to a mission of some sort. And I guess part of it is that I've had an unswerving dedication to ending up where I want to go, because here's the way I was explaining it to somebody that I was chatting with this morning is I knew, you know, that all the decisions I made in my 20s led me to where I was at in my 30s, or where I was at the age of 30. And where I was at the age of 30 was rock bottom with a career that was going nowhere. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have to start over and make drastically different decisions in my 30s, some of which will probably be unpopular, some of which will be challenging, difficult, and may, you know, change the timeline of my life significantly while my friends are off doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. But at the same time, they made decisions in their 20s that got them to where they wanted to be when they were 30. I didn't. So that's kind of the way I think about it.
And also, I think there's some curveballs that everybody gets thrown that we're not exactly sure of. But you know that, so I'm raising two kids that have never been to school. So we don't send them to traditional school, yet they learn every single day. And what's really cool about that is that, I think to myself, so you, like me, like we all went the regular route, though. We went to college. We bought into the, regular dreams that everybody is supposed to follow in order to, like you say, in your 20s and your 30s, and these expectations for, well, my kids say that I'm going to live till 150, so I think I'm going to be really tired by then. But seriously, like, we are living longer lives than people used to.
Sure.
But we think that we're supposed to have something done by a certain time, and if we follow that map and that, go to college and do that thing, this is going to work out. And I think so many people are realizing that it's not really working out. Like, we have to all put the brakes on and kind of say, like, well, this is weird. Like, you're giving us all this great advice, but it's not really working out for us. I know a lot of people who graduate from college who can't get a job.
Right.
And it's that catch-22. Everyone's like, you need a skill, you need experience. You're like, well, I've been in school since I'm like 5, or so it's like, when was I supposed to learn any type of skills, except if you do it on your own, right? But I mean,
right.
So it's just challenging. And when I was asking you about what kind of coping methods you have, it reminds me, I really enjoyed your podcast yesterday. Now, I haven't listened to all of them, and I would like to, really, but honestly, with 2 kids that are home all the time and working and stuff, and us working and everything, I can't. But I did catch the one with Lucas Carlson, and I thought it was interesting. It was a synchronicity for me because I'm actually writing my first book, and I was writing about our family's core values and like what we live by.
Right.
And I was inspired by, after a few years back, I was reading Tony Hsieh of Zappos, his book, Delivering Happiness, and learning their core values of their business and everything. And I decided to we always lived by them, but I decided to write them down. And I was just shocked when Lucas started talking about the core values that he had for his life. And I think, wouldn't it be great if everyone was taught to have like a set of core values, not just for a company, but actually for you as a family or as an individual? Because then as you're using your compass, you would be guided by these core values.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, and something that I've learned the hard way, because anytime I've done anything that is out of alignment with my values, it inevitably leads me to disaster. It's just one of those things that, like, you really, really, I think it's cool because once you get clear on what they are, most people don't have any idea what their values are because there's no process for that. We're not taught that in school. It's not something that, there's no, learn your values 101 when you get to college. If you did, you'd make drastically different choices. And so that's why, we have an entire $1 billion industry of self-help, because you have to uncover and undo all the bullshit. Sorry, if I can't swear on this show, you'll have to. I was gonna say I don't know how to bleep, but maybe my husband will know.
It's okay. Don't just be yourself.
So the thing is that, you just have so much baggage to undo. Yeah. With that, but I think that really, really being clear on your values and having the courage to stick to them is really critical.
Yeah, and I think that, but we were raised, I think, to be kind of hard on ourselves too, because and viewing things as mistakes and as problems, and that you messed up, and so we're really hard on ourselves. So then we have to kind of go this route of like trying to figure out how do we forgive ourselves for not being who we thought we would be by now, or being where we thought we would be. And you're right. So my intention, and with my writing and what I'm doing and how I'm raising my kids, is that I know that they're going to have their own challenges and their own paths and their own journey, and they're here for their own spiritual lessons, but still I'm hoping they can have less to recover from, so they don't have so much peeling to do. Maybe little tinier onions or something like that. They don't have to go as deep. But I think that I was wondering, you talk about, is this a word? I think that you said it. I hope I'm saying it right, but mimicry.
Yeah.
And
I don't know. Maybe it is a word. I don't know.
Is it a word? I don't know, but I like it. Because I was thinking to myself, that's what happens now too, especially with, the internet. And I told my husband, speaking about the law of attraction, I feel like of course what you focus on expands, but I feel like everyone is, copying each other and trying to figure it out. And they think, oh, well, this person really looks like they've got it down, so I'm going to maybe try that route. And it's like, who do you choose? You know what I mean? Like, so I was thinking, after all these people, you've done over 500 interviews, you've probably maybe heard some stories that are like, God, that sounds really amazing. Like, I wonder if I try that, in some way, not necessarily their story, but maybe their path to success or something like that.
Well, that's a good observation. And here's what I would say. Probably the most useful thing that has come from all of that is not the ability to copy what somebody else has done, but the ability to mix together hundreds of different ideas from hundreds of people in ways that only I could, and connecting dots in the only way I could, like working with designers in a way that only I could. Each interview gives me a perspective on the world and shapes and shifts the way I see something. So each one becomes a filter through which I see the world. So it's like I've got, this, rainbow pair of glasses. So I see the world through the lens of all these brilliant artists and creators, and I can take from each one of them something that I've learned and input it into something that I'm making. And it's funny because if we go back and like start to look at, the influence of the work, like what influenced why something looks the way it does, why something sounds the way it does, why something is marketed the way it is. Every one of it has been influenced by one person or another. But at the end of the day, all of that, the concept is entirely mine originally. Like what comes together, the package from connecting all those dots. And that's really the way I think of it. So, I don't listen to a lot of information about how to do things because I don't really care. I'm not interested in how to do something the way somebody else did it, unless it's something that's, sort of a technical detail of, okay, optimize this Facebook button so it gets more likes. Beyond that, I don't care. I'm like, okay, this is what the landing page should look like. And I'm like, well, that's great, but I want the landing page to have artwork on it. I think that it's stupid that a landing page follows this sequence, those kinds of things, right? So again, I mean, it really is, here's how I'll sum it up. I approach everything much more like an artist and much less like a marketer. That's my approach to all of this. I think that another way to think about it is, who would you rather model in terms of your view of the world, Steve Jobs or Bill Gates? Both equally brilliant at what they did, but one has one is an artist, and the other, I think, is a mechanic.
Right. So it's two very different. Well, it's very different styles.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing: there's nothing wrong with either one, right? Both of them have led to incredibly successful places. It's just a matter of what resonates with you. And again, that takes us back to core values. If the work you're doing isn't resonating with you and it's out of alignment with your values, you're never going to get anywhere with it. Like, you will never make the quantum leap that you're looking to make.
Right. And I think that it's funny. My husband and I, we started, what happens, I think, for entrepreneurs, actually, when you start, I'm almost envious of my past self, because when I started off, I was like 20, and I was so, oh my God, just talk about rainbow colored glasses. I was like, oh my God, anything's possible. The world is possible. And I know that it is still, but because I've tried a few things with that thought process and then they didn't work, I thought, well, maybe it's not. Then you start to doubt a little bit. You think, well, maybe that's not possible. Maybe we can't do that. But, I think it takes amazing courage, but like the very first client that we ever got was a website client, and it was for like a nursing home. And it was inspired because I had a grandfather who was sick and needed a nursing home, and my parents were looking for, a place, and they had to miss all this work and everything like that. And I said to, my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, I said, wouldn't it be amazing if they could just look on this new thing called the internet and they just check out a few places and then take off one day and go see it, right? And I walked in, to this opportunity, and I said to my husband, I can't go in. I don't have like a business card. I can't. They're going to like laugh at me. He said, just go. Just tell them, we'll make them something. If they like it, they could pay us. If they don't like it, they don't have to pay us. Who's going to like turn that down, right? And I got it. And then then I got the client, and I was like, well, we don't know how to do websites. Like, now how are we going to do it? And we figured it out. We learned it, and we worked with them, and we really cared about it. And it was so amazing to produce something. And then they paid us like $2,500. And, it wasn't mapped out. Like, there was no map. If someone would have told me how to walk in there and what to say and what to do, I would have never been able to do it. courage of winging it, I think, is, it's maybe what we call risky, but you can't bottle that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, the stories that you tell, the people that you shine a light on, I think it's so important because these are all people who have very diverse backgrounds, and probably nobody handed them the map to get them there.
No, not at all.
So the way that they got there was by ripping it apart and throwing out the map, and then that's how they ended up where they are, with that story to tell, which we believe is much more interesting. So if we all believe that it's much more interesting, why do you think everyone's so afraid to do it? Because we all kind of like those stories.
Well, okay, so it's much more interesting, but that doesn't mean it's free of pain. It isn't free of suffering. That it's free of suffering and that it's going to be easy, right? That's why we're afraid, because part of it is going to suck. It's not going to be awesome at parts. The part that's awesome is, when you get to the other side and you get to experience the joy and the thrill of it all. But you also have to be willing to suffer, what goes on behind the scenes. Like, you have to be able to deal with the unknown. You have to be able to deal with the uncertainty. You have to be able to deal with the fact that everybody may not approve. You have to be able to deal with a lot of things that we are conditioned out of being okay with, right? Like, the conversation I was having this morning was with a woman named El Luna, who wrote a beautiful book called The Crossroads of Should and Must. And, she calls this our shoulds, like all the things we should do, really. I mean, and there's piles and piles and piles and layers of all of this nonsense. And so that's a big part of it, is learning to calm that voice in your head down. And that's why we don't, because we know it's more interesting. We know but we also know that it's an unknown. It's not guaranteed to work. It's not proven. And so it's easy to go and do what's comfortable. It's easy what's proven to work, because that's just you don't have to deal with the dark side of, chasing interesting answers.
Right. I think there's a myth in there somewhere, though, because my husband and I have been entrepreneurs for all these years. I would say 15, 20 years. And we have bought into the myth that it's easier. But we know a lot of people who are sitting in their cubicle or just, dying a slow death, who have a regular job and have gotten a regular paycheck and are just so unfulfilled and, not living their truth. So, but when it gets really hard, we think that our suffering is worse than their suffering.
Yeah.
So, we'll just throw our hands up in the air when we're like making a video game and be like, we should just really open a pizza place. Because I'm sure that it's easier to like have a pizza place, which we know that that's definitely not true to own some sort of food establishment. But you just think like, you want a pizza or you don't want a pizza. Like, it's really simple. You're hungry, you're not hungry, right?
Right.
Like, and so I think that's, that's sort of a fallacy too. I had the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Wayne Dyer's daughter. Her name is Serena Dyer, and they just wrote a book together called Don't Die With Your Music Still in You. And it's all about listening to that voice. And I think people like you providing the platform that you're doing, I mean, for me anyway, it inspires us to keep going, and it inspires us to believe that we can listen to the music in us, and we should not be turning the volume down on that. Like, we have to. And even when we can't see our way out, we have to somehow find a way to tap into that, because I know that it's worth it. And like Lucas was saying yesterday, it's not a matter of, I think we should probably get rid of the word suffering and maybe call it something else, because it sounds so painful, but it's really just life, I think, an experience, either route, whichever one you choose.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
I mean, I don't know about throwing out the word suffering altogether. I think there's some usefulness in that. I think that I look at this now, and I was talking with a friend a while back, and this kind of just came to my mind. She was dropping her kids off at daycare, and we were chatting, and I said, I wish I'd figured this all out when I was 20.
Oh my God, I always say that.
And she said, yeah, but the thing is that you couldn't do the work that you do in the way that you do it if you had. It's all these experiences that turn you into who you are. So maybe there is some purpose to our suffering.
Yeah.
And without it, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. I think that part of I mean, I jokingly say that half the guests on our show are me conquering my own demons, and that's why I choose the people that I do. And at the same time, maybe the experiences of stuff that sucks is what allows us to have the empathy to ask the kinds of questions that other people will resonate with or want to know as well.
Right. And somehow you do that. And I heard you say that you don't really do much preparation.
I don't do any. I almost never do any research on the people I interview. I mean, I did today because I had some very specific things that I was curious about. But I mean, of all the questions that came up, maybe no, not even one was scripted. I mean, it's funny because she was on a publicity tour, and she said, "Well, these are the things that everybody's been asking me about." And I said, "Okay, cool." And she didn't know that I wasn't going to specifically ask about those. I'm like, "Don't worry, we'll get there. We'll just do it in the way that I want to do it." And because of that, it opened up a lot of space for her to talk about things that she probably hadn't talked about elsewhere. And that's just, and again, I think part of that is if we didn't have the experiences that we've been through, we wouldn't have that capacity to basically go deep with somebody that way.
Yeah, and I think we all do that. Sometimes I look at my kids and I say, and I'm 41 now, and I say to myself, like, God, I wish that I had started this, either just, I don't know, started learning this stuff sooner, or I wish that I had it figured out, so now I wouldn't be figuring it out while they're watching me figure it out, and you're modeling for somebody else what you're going through, and sometimes you think, should I show them that, or is that too much, or because you want them to see how you are authentically, and I think a lot of parents don't do that. So I think us growing up, we don't really know that because we don't see it. We're not, we don't grow up around them telling us the truth or what's really going on or why they're upset, and so a lot of emotions are hidden. And so I think for us to have to, figure out, should we be doing that or shouldn't we be doing that with anyone, not just like our kids, but with our family, with our friends. Somebody online the other day, it's funny, I think he's kind of a real, big sort of public person for helping other people. And he broke down and said he was going through a really rough time and he couldn't ask for help. And it was interesting, though, because his people who were closest to him and his friends, and I think people maybe he even coaches, said, we had no idea. Like, how could you not even tell us? They were kind of, like, upset because they were like, we tell you these, like, deep stories and you didn't even tell us. But he didn't even feel safe, opening himself up.
Yeah. That's a tough one, right? Because, I mean, in that role, we unfortunately place superhuman expectations on these people, and we forget that, by the way, they're screwed up and normal just like the rest of us.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if you've read Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed, but I mean, I have endless passages about in that book highlighted. It's such brilliant writing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think more and more people who are writing, we're lucky we have so much information, because it's not, we're not restricted to just people who were approved with writing, but we have a lot of people's authentic viewpoints that are getting through all these other channels of publishing.
Definitely.
That's really cool. Well, I have to tell you, I would like to be able to do the interviews without notes and stuff, but I wake up like during the night or in the morning and I'm thinking like, I think I should write it down. Like, I don't know if I'm going to remember that I want to ask that. So I'm really excited for you that you're able to do that and just sort of connect. I think maybe after that many, amount of interviews that you do, you probably get to some sort of level of comfort with,
I mean,
allowing it to flow.
There's that. I'm also never satisfied. Like, I'm always thinking, how could we have done better? How could we have had more depth? For me, the conversation is always like, how do I get something out of this person that nobody's been able to get? That's really the goal. If I can get that, and if I can get them to even acknowledge that in an interview, I know I'm getting somewhere that most people can't. And that's constantly been what has driven me to get better at what I do. Like even today, like I said, I mean, by all accounts, I would say our audience will say that was a hit. And I still think there are questions I wanted to ask that I didn't get to. Like there's stuff that's still on my mind. It was like, oh, okay, I'm like, I would have connected the dots a little differently there. Like I still miss things. But I mean, I think I never took notes. I used to sometimes doodle while I was talking to them, and I'll still do this sometimes while I'll write down. Oh, sorry, did I turn off my camera?
No, you're still there.
Okay.
You're good.
I would doodle and I would write down things that they wanted to talk about, and then I would write just a phrase so I could connect the dots later on. But more and more, I just kind of listen. I try just to sit and absorb it and stay as present as possible, and then kind of figure out where do I go from there. I'm not thinking about what question do I want to ask next. I'm really listening to the answer, and I guess whatever question pops up naturally based on the answer I hear is where I'll go next. I mean, sometimes I'm about a step ahead of them, but not too far.
Which is amazing, because then you're actually practicing being in the now and having true presence with that person.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Because they say half of our listening, Eckhart Tolle and everybody writes about half of our listening to someone is usually spent preparing an answer. Mm-hmm. Instead of actually being with them and listening to the words. And I feel it now a little. I'll tell you, because I'm new at this, so I'm so grateful that you were willing to join me as well. But I'm sort of on the new side, and as a newbie, I'm sort of thinking of, is there going to be maybe the notes are because is there going to be an awkward moment of silence where it's how's the weather, mm-hmm. Or is it going to flow naturally? And then the other thing is that a lot of people so far that I've interviewed, I actually have read their book because I enjoyed it, and then I asked them to come on because I really wanted to connect because I really enjoyed it. So it's and I was going to say, how could you possibly, if you had to take notes and do everything you had to do, I have no idea how you would prepare for that amount of shows. How often do you tape? How often do you record?
Well, as far as recording, maybe a couple times a week. I mean, we publish 2 episodes a week.
2 episodes a week.
And we've done 2 episodes a week consistently we're coming up at the end of this year. So 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, I mean, it's been, at the end of this year, it'll be 6 years.
Wow. Yeah. So as you create this new vision, to build your brand and, continue to expand your company, what does that look like for you? What is that vision? Do you still want to keep doing the shows? And
yeah, I mean, I think that, to be honest, we're just scratching the surface in terms of what's possible. I mean, to me, this is really, the journey is just starting in so many ways. Now I think with a chance to do a traditional book with a publisher, that's going to be actually 2 books with a publisher. That's going to be an extension of the brand, and also to really up the caliber of guests and really bring the brand to a level of prominence, so that it is sort of, I mean, I would like to be the kind of brand that on the internet has sort of the cachet of. I mean, I think TED has lost its brand cachet personally, because it's gotten so diluted. But what TED was in its heyday, in 2009, we looked at it and we said, okay, yeah, that's a place where people know that appearing on TED meant something. And I think for me, I want an appearance on Unmistakable Creative to actually mean something. I know it's funny because I know people set it as a goal. It's really funny to hear that from people, but I would like it to have that reputation. I want it to be a coveted media appearance, not, for my own ego, but for continually providing something of service to our listeners. I think that because of the way we've developed this brand, we've had a chance to really stand out a lot amongst a lot of noise and do something very distinctive. And I've gotten a world-class education from the people that I talk to, and that to me is priceless. No matter what happens, within the next year or two, that will carry me, I think, for the rest of my life. That's a skill set and an education that I think will lead to some pretty amazing places.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Do you have a list of, or just even a few people that you've been really, really wanting to speak to that you haven't yet? Do you still have a...
Yeah, I mean, mine, amazingly enough, they're not people that are famous on the internet. They're people that are actually famous, real famous.
Oh, okay.
I would love to sit down and chat with Jon Stewart. How does Jon Stewart become Jon Stewart? That's got to be such a fascinating trajectory. What is the story of Jon Stewart before he made it? When he was struggling at MTV. I want to hear about the struggles and challenges. The Tina Feys of the world, the Judd Apatow's. That's sort of the next caliber, I think, of interview, and that's where I'd like to get to.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I think you can do it. I think you will do it, just by sticking with it and having that vision. It's amazing. And wow, that's a big commitment, 2 shows a week. Because I know that there's a lot of work involved with the production of the show.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I personally want to thank you for it because I think it's really, really amazing. And I think in the world of there's so many podcasts, to listen to now.
Right.
That people can really find the voice that they're, interested, and you have that consistency of bringing those people in. Mm-hmm. So however you attract them and however they, inspire you and pop up, it's really awesome for all of us who get to listen.
Thanks.
So is there anything else that you would want to tell us that you're working on? I know you mentioned that you have this like a book deal now. That must be amazing. And I know you're going to have a lot of people that are going to say, how did that happen? And, oh, it looks like that must have happened overnight. And when you know that there was a big story behind that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, right? I mean, I've spent years interviewing people who had those stories, the Cinderella stories of, hey, publisher found me on the internet, and next thing I know, I'm getting a book deal. And I was like, well, I mean, yeah, now I'm one of those stories. It took 6 years.
Right.
So, an acquisitions editor at Penguin Portfolio found, my some articles that I'd written on Medium, and then she started following the podcast, and then she reached out, and she'd seen that, I'd had a self-published book that did quite well. And so we got to talking, and, I contacted a literary agent who happened to be Seth Godin's literary agent at the recommendation of a friend and somebody who was a former guest on the show. And here we are a week later, and they're like, hey, we're ready to make an offer, and it's not just for one book, we want you to do 2. And, I'm giving you a very short version of a long story, but it was definitely one of those sort of surreal moments. You're like, okay, this is like, it's like, wow, I'm suddenly the story of the people whose stories I've been telling.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah.
And you really probably can't say that you're not a skilled writer, because after all this experience you're going to have, writing 2 books, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm not a skilled writer. I would say that I have one. I think my gift as an interviewer is significantly more strong, significantly more powerful.
Right. Does it feel more like downstream, or more at ease when you're doing that?
Yeah, without a doubt. I don't feel like it's as hard.
Yeah.
I can write, but writing a book and doing it for a publisher is a whole different project. It's work. It's serious amounts of work, and most people don't see what goes on to get it. Like, you see a book on a shelf, you forget that, that took 18 months of, grinding it out and sleepless nights or whatever it is. 18 months of serious commitment from somebody who really was, going to give it everything they had.
Yeah, and we hang out at Barnes & Noble a lot with our kids.
Yeah.
And when you look around, you're just inundated with books at every, turn, and you just look all over, and it's so, you're like, oh my God. And when I walk in, I really feel that. I feel like everybody has this story of how it even got on the shelf.
Yeah.
When you pull somebody's book off, that there's this amount of, energy and dreams and vision that went into it. And a lot of people, that it took to make that happen.
Right.
So we're always very appreciative of that. So I was just going to ask you, doing what you've been doing, have you found that, have you had like a support system to kind of do this lifestyle, that you can talk it through and, sort of talk about the doubts and or is that something?
Yeah. I have a business partner who works with me. I see a therapist a couple times a month. All of that. That was another conversation we were having today on the show, is about the stigma around mental health and therapists and coaches and all that stuff. I think it's important. I think it's one, I think it's like, you have to know the difference between a support system and a crutch. And I think that's where people lose their, sort of ability to function. But yeah, nothing we do, like the reason that everything we do is of the caliber that it is because we've got an incredible team behind us. You've seen Sarah Steelan's illustrations, like she does every album cover.
Oh yeah, they're awesome.
It's a work of art. It's beautiful to watch somebody work like that. And then, I'm actually not the CEO, I'm the founder. And that's by design. Like, I realized I was not meant to be CEO. So my business partner, Brian, actually is day-to-day running operations. He takes the role of CEO. Like, no big decisions are made without my say-so, but we really, as far as running the finances strategically and making decisions, he basically plays a role in all of that and making sure that I can kind of keep my eye on, creating and really moving things forward that way. But yeah, I mean, you definitely need a support system. I think that you have to have people that you can implicitly trust. And I think you have to have what I call unconditional friends, the people who will basically be there when you're at your worst and your best. You know, it's easy to support somebody when they're at their best and they're on top of the world. But when they're not, that takes a whole different skill.
Right.
And those are the people I think that are really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's one of our core values is unconditional love. I just want to ask you, do you have like who are like your biggest influencers, like your like the Tony Robbins of the world,
Yeah, mine mainly come from my people that I've interviewed. As far as who influences the way I create. You mentioned the interview with Dani Shapiro. Dani Shapiro's work has been instrumental in my ability as a writer. Like I really love her work. I mean, her book Still Writing is one of my favorites. It's on my shelf. I pick it up every couple of days and just kind of thumb through it. Eric Wall is a graffiti artist, had a tremendous influence on me in terms of learning to connect dots and looking at different art forms and not just sticking to this one thing. A guy named AJ Leon, who is another guy who runs a community called Misfit Inc. and a design agency called Misfit Inc. I mean, he had a tremendous influence on the way I saw the world and the way I decided to create what I wanted to. So those are sort of three big ones.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. So I just want to ask you one more question. What advice do you have for someone who wants to make a big life change, to become unmistakable, but they can't get past their excuse list? Do you have any small. Tips or?
Yeah, I mean, start small, right? Make what my friend Peter Sims called little bets. Things that basically are risky, but not so risky that they will cause you to basically like lose everything that you ever have, but risky enough that they'll give you enough feedback so that they can move you to the next level. And that's the way I would do it. Little steps at a time. Because I think that, people assume that a project, so I'll give you an example, like when we did our first live event last year, right? I mean, which was this just epic multimedia extravaganza production with 60 people, 9 speakers. I mean, it was really a lot of work. It started with throwing up a landing page and seeing if anybody would come. That's it. And then you go from there. One little step at a time. You push it each day just a little bit. I mean, what you're seeing right now is 6 years of doing something every single day.
Right. And no matter what, it takes that time and effort, like no matter what, where anybody starts or anything that anybody wants to do, right? It takes that, you got to put the time in.
You got it.
To go through the process of that journey.
Without a doubt.
Right. And so when we look on Facebook or we look on LinkedIn or anything else and we're comparing ourselves to anybody else, we're not getting the full story.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
You're getting a very curated and edited version.
Right, with a beautiful photographed, professional photo or something, right?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So it doesn't show what they go through. Well, I really, really, really thank you for your time today. I know that it must be interesting for you to be on both sides of the microphone. And
definitely.
I maybe threw you for a loop with video too, but I was really happy to be able to connect with you like that.
Cool.
And so thank you so much, and we'll be looking forward to all the unmistakable creative projects that you inspire.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you so much. Namaste.
Yeah.